My name is Haley Peterson. Today I'm going to be giving my final presentation on John Piaget. So for part one, which is the biography, first we'll go over his early life and family. So he was born August 9th, 1896 in Neuchâtel, Switzerland to Arthur Piaget and Rebecca Jackson. His father was a professor of medieval literature and language. He was the eldest child with two younger sisters. His mother's alleged neurotic tendencies may have helped spark his early fascinations with psychology. Some sources have written about how he basically was trying to psychoanalyze her from a young age. He enjoyed reading books on complex topics such as philosophy, sociology, and theology, even when he was a young child. And he was a member of associations such as the Club of the Friends of Nature and socialist movements. He had an interest in zoology from an early age. That was kind of the first area of science that he was interested in. So he published several articles on animals such as the albino sparrow and mollusks, which are pictured here. His paper on the albino sparrow is considered the beginning of his scientific career. He wrote this when he was only 11 years old, and many of his readers were unaware of his young age, and they assumed him to be an expert on the topics, so this earned him a positive reputation among European zoologists. So, a story from his childhood is that he actually experienced a false memory. His nanny fabricated a story about fighting off a kidnapper that was trying to kidnap a baby Piaget. And she then wrote to his family when Piaget was 15 to admit that she had made the story up. So Piaget was dumbfounded because he had formed a detailed memory of the incident, and even after he understood that it was false, the memory still endured. And this false memory was actually documented by U.S. psychologist Elizabeth Loftus in her book titled Eyewitness Testimony. So, for his education, he attended the University of Neuchâtel, where he studied zoology and philosophy, and then he received his doctorate in philosophy. He published two philosophical essays during this time, and those began to lay the foundation of his worldview. And it was also during this time he became interested in psychology and epistemology. So this led him to travel to Zurich and study under Carl Jung and Eugen Bleuler. And he then studied at the Sorbonne in Paris. And in 1921, he became a director of studies at the J.J. Rousseau Institute in Geneva. So all three of these locations are pictured here. He also did some work with a fellow psychologist and a friend of his, Alfred Binet, who developed the first intelligence test. And Piaget spent a year working with Binet at his institution. And this is where Piaget had the revelation that children experience different thought processes than adults did, and this idea would inspire the rest of his career. So his marriage and adulthood, he married Valentine Châtenay in 1923. They met at the J.J. Rousseau Institute. They had three children, Jacqueline, Lucien, and Laurent, and Piaget studied his children's development from their infancy into their childhood. He occupied many different chairs throughout his career, including psychology, sociology, and history of science at Neuchâtel and history of scientific thinking at Geneva. He founded and directed the International Center for Genetic Epistemology, and he placed great importance on cultivating friendships throughout his career. He was described by many of his colleagues as outgoing and friendly. So his later life and death, two of the prestigious awards that he won were the Erasmus Prize and the Balzan Prize for Social and Political Sciences. He passed away on September 16th, 1980 in Geneva at age 84, and he had requested to be buried with his family in an unmarked grave in Geneva, which is pictured here. He was hospitalized for 10 days before his death, but his cause of death was never disclosed, and at the time of his death, he had written over 50 books and hundreds of papers. So for part two, his works, one of his most well-known works is his Stages of Development. So this details phases of intellectual development that humans go through from infancy to adulthood. Piaget developed this through recording and studying infants, children, and teens. His lab work included observing and having conversations with his own children as well as other children. So there are 4 stages of development: sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. And although children may pass through the stages at different ages, the development will always follow this sequence and the stages are not skipped. At least this was his belief about that. So it was a revolutionary theory at the time because it suggested that children have different thought processes and cognitive abilities than adults, which was something that was not really considered before. So this just kind of details into the different stages. The sensory motor usually occurs from birth up until 2 years. Infants master their physical reflexes. They learn through interacting with their environment. They display goal oriented behavior and they start to learn object permanence. Pre-operational is 2 to 7 years. This is where they start to develop symbolic thinking. They might mimic behavior. They have egocentric thinking, which is where they don't understand things from others' perspectives, and they begin the emergence of language. Concrete operational is 7 to 11 years. This is where the logical and concrete reasoning begins. Egocentric thinking is decreasing. They start to understand conservation, but they still lack abstract thinking. And then formal operational is 11 up until adulthood. This is where they start to understand abstract concepts, creativity, problem solving, logic, and they also may become more self conscious. So, schemas, this is another one of Piaget's kind of theories or concepts that he created. Schemas are mental and physical actions involved with understanding and knowing information. So, if a child encounters a green apple after only seeing red apples, a schema of the apple is modified. Assimilation is when they use these existing schemas to interpret a new situation or object. So, this would be like if they see a lime after only seeing green apples, they might identify it as a lime. Accommodation is when a child changes their schema or creates a new one, and equilibration is a balance between assimilation and accommodation. So, some theories of learning from Piaget, there's active learning, which is independent exploration and discovery learning, which is where students explore pre planned activities to help them understand key ideas. And he believed both of these were important and his beliefs for the classroom and how students should learn. He believed they should be taught how to solve problems. Their learning environment should reflect the stage of development they're in. He believed in an importance of social interaction and even peer conflict because it can lead students to question why they think a certain way or believe something. So, part three is his impact. So, of course, there are some criticisms of his theories. He was an early pioneer in developmental psychology, so his theories have been revised over time. Modern experts now believe his stages of development are not quite the same for each child and they may overlap. Also, that some adults never reach the formal operational stage. And recent research has shown children move away from egocentrism by 4 to 5 years old, which is earlier than what Piaget proposed of 7 to 11 years old. And Piaget did not take into account sociocultural, geographical, or socioeconomic factors in his research. Much of his works actually only involved his own children as participants. But he does still, of course, have a lasting legacy. His work provided breakthroughs in the knowledge of child development and an increased interest in cognitive and developmental psychology. So he kind of paved the way for more modern psychologists in that way. His theories are still widely studied today in many fields. Um, a lot of a lot of psychologists these days still are able to like sing his praises and note the impact that he had, especially from the 1960s to the 1980s. Like it says here, his theory and research really dominated psychology. And he was ranked second in professional journal citations and fourth in citations for introductory psychology textbooks. So these are my references, the first slide and the second slide. Thank you.